Major Kira believes her mother died in the Singha refugee center. Ducat calls lilacs lilacs. And Kira says she's going to have to shower for a week to get the smell of that Leggett off of her. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Oh, man. How are you, everybody?
My name is Ryan T. Husk. Today, we're doing a review of Deep Space Nine Season 6, Episode 17, Wrongs Darker Than Death or Night. This is written by Ira Steven Behr and Hans Beimler. It's directed by, very interestingly, Jonathan West, who's a director of photography, amazing one. And this was April Fool's Day, April 1st, 1998. Whew, how you doing?
Doing good. Weather's been really nice out here. I don't know about your side of town, but it's been extremely warm.
It is windy today.
Is it?
Yeah, it's windy up here.
Yeah. No, it's been nice and warm. It's no wind, but just beautiful blue skies. So it's always warm. Nice to enjoy. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's always fun.
Yeah. So, boy, this episode, huh? This, one thing, let's just get out of the way at the very beginning here. One thing I noticed, because I remember this episode, I remember thinking, oh, God, Ducat's such a creep. But I always forget how great of an actor Marc Alaimo is, that every single line he says to me is like an acting clinic of like, there are no wasted lines. Make every line interesting. Don't take, don't take any lines off. There's something you can do with each line that makes it more interesting or more disgusting or more surprising. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know. I never really forget about Marc Alaimo's talent and his ability, because I know that as soon as I see him, I get this kind of disgust in the bottom of my stomach. So I know he's effective at what he does. But actually, along those same lines, I was thinking about Odo on those same lines, because when the scene where Kira kind of comes in and she's having her little, she's kind of on edge and she's pissed off about what Ducat told her in that message.
Right.
When she comes into security and she's like, some shoplifting going on. I need to take care of that. I thought that Odo, Renee in this case, gave some very subtle moments where he was kind of registering her kind of disgruntled demeanor, and I enjoyed the reactionary shots from him that let me know that he was processing this information. So it just goes to, and it's just a small scene. I think there were just a few lines in it, one of which I really liked, when he says, you seem irritable. I see,
and be careful with that. Be careful with that.
Yeah, I see Bashir is not exaggerating. So when it was like a tough one, because he actually took a lot of nerve for him to say that in that moment. But ultimately, I thought there were moments in there where he wasn't being too judgmental. He wasn't being too upset about it. He was just the right level of taking note of something and seeing if there was something on his end that he could do to, get her mind off of it or talk about something. So just the subtlety in that performance, those are the kinds of things that I think you're talking about.
Yeah. In that one scene too, it was only one scene in a few lines, but I was nervous for Odo. I'm like, when somebody comes in and they're being unreasonably rude or, bitter about something, and you can usually tell, look, there's no way this person is this annoyed or this upset about this normal thing. You got to tread very lightly when you go, what's really bothering you? Because a lot of times they're not in the mood to be like, oh, thanks for asking. They're going to be like, shit, mind your own fucking nothing. I just really want you to do the freaking thing. And then later, when they're feeling better, they can come back and be like, hey, sorry, whatever. But I was like, look out, Odo. She's not afraid to beat someone up. We've seen her do it before.
Yeah. But there's also that element of the feelings that he has for her, right? Because we know that he has these deep-seated feelings for Kira, and even though they've kind of both agreed not to talk about it at this point, it feels like from that angle he was trying to reach her, like like somebody who really deeply, truly cares about you, and you know, in a personal way. So you feel like you have a license to do that because of the
Right.
feelings that you guys have for each other and the kind of understanding that you have.
And kudos to the
Um,
character of Kira, specifically the character, to be able to take a beat, take a breath and say, okay, and like kind of take herself out of it and, be an adult about it. Because a lot of times we're not in the mood to talk about stuff or to open up, no matter how great of a friend that person is that's asking us. We're not always in the mood to be like, oh, well, thanks for asking. I'm glad you noticed that I'm very
yeah,
irrational and upset right now. I'd love to talk about it.
yeah, yeah. Usually, when you're in that kind of a mood, you don't want to talk.
Right.
But I don't know about you, but the first thing I kind of thought about in the opening of this episode was, when was the last time I saw Ducat? Because I thought I saw Ducat kind of going crazy, and
Yeah.
after Zial, he just kind of lost his mind.
Yeah.
And I thought he just went crazy and was in an insane asylum type of situation.
Yeah, you're right. And now that you mention it, it would have been nice for his present day, his call when he called her in, to reflect that a little bit, to show him, like, the fact that he's calling her and saying weird stuff, that demonstrates a little bit about him being weird, but that also is believable for previous Ducat. He loves to kind of needle her and whatever. It would have been nice to see something where he's tweaking, like he's scratching his shoulder, or he's looking over his shoulder, or although I did notice that he was very wet. Did you notice that? Like, very sweaty. I put that in my notes. I was like, why is Ducat wet? Like, you look like he just got out of the shower. It's like, I just got to call her right now, because he was drenched. And I was thinking maybe it was just hot on set that day and the actor was sweating, but not really, because it was on the prosthetics. So I wonder if maybe that was kind of their way of showing, like, he's a bundle of nerves right now. I mean, everybody go back and watch that episode. When he's calling in, he's drenched like if he just spent a summer in California's Central Valley. Like, he was hanging out in Bakersfield.
No, I didn't pay attention to that. I was kind of curious. I was actually looking in the background to see if there was something in the background that would signify where he was, like if he was in captivity somewhere in a cell. Right. But I think a little bit of background information would have helped me out in that moment. I would have liked to know, for example, if Ducat was seeing a therapist and the therapist was telling him that he had to resolve a lot of issues.
Interesting.
And this was one of the things that, he was being coaxed into doing, because it was part of his, rehabilitation process to get his sanity back. If that was explained to me, I would have been like, oh, that's perfectly logical for me, that he has to kind of make amends with all of these things, these demons in his head, and that would be one of them. But I was saying, where did I last see Ducat? And now he's like just popping up out of nowhere with some, I hooked up with your mama jokes. It's like, wait a minute, where did this guy come from? So that was a little bit hard for me in the beginning to kind of just process. But once I got over that and I accepted the premise that, okay, somehow he just got out a message from wherever he was and he had the urge to say this to Kira, I kind of accepted it and moved on. But it did have a little bit of, just a little hesitation for me to, like, where is this guy coming from? Or is this a setup?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, it's funny because now everybody at home is going, God, I've watched this episode 9 times and I didn't think about that. Or some people are saying, yes, I've been saying that for 20 years, but to me, I'm like, oh yeah, I never even thought of that. That's a good point. Because when we last leave Ducat, when Sisko and him, kind of have that trial in the caves, we naturally expect, okay, next time we see Ducat, he's going to be crazy in some way, whether he's going to be extra ruthless or he's going to be shivering in a corner going, oh, Sisko, whatever. There's going to be something different. There's going to be at least another layer to what he's doing. And his situation, like you said, maybe it's a therapist, maybe he's in a brig somewhere. Who knows what's going on? But you're right. Yeah, this next time we see him, there isn't any of that, or at least that we can see, but that's probably just because this was an episode that was planned out, back in season 4 or 5 or something. They just kind of were like, okay, how about right here? We just drop this one in, kind of one of those bottle type episodes that still do have some kind of implications on the character because, now Kira is going to move forward knowing this about her mom, maybe be a little bit more embittered, but also, have a little bit more of a nuanced approach to, how she feels about her family.
Yeah. And that was the other thing that was difficult for me is like, I don't know if I don't want to be there for any of that. Like if I could go back in time, I'm definitely not going back in time to, see what my mom was up to. I don't want to know. Just go ahead and, bypass that. But this was an interesting story in that, one thing that I think DS9 does so well with their villains is they give them these redemptive qualities. They give them these complex kind of storylines that make you root for people that you actually hate, or see a different side of somebody that you have dead set in your mind. This is how they are, and they're, I'm not changing. And in this case with Dukat, I was certain that he was playing the game. I was certain that he had some kind of extra, there was some other ulterior motive to what he was doing, especially when the other guy, who smelled that Kira wanted to wash off of him.
I got the line right here. It is,
yes,
I only hope that you won't condemn us all for the boorish behavior of one man, which was brilliant because when he first says that, Kira looks at him like, what the hell are you talking about? And we're thinking like, what is he talking about? And then Dukat says it and we go, aha, yes.
Beautiful writing.
Perfect.
Love the way that kind of flowed. And then it made you say, oh, this guy's a creep. He's like all of this stuff is calculated. So even his pleasantries are calculated. Even when he's being good, he's actually has this, deceit and this, this other kind of motive behind what he's trying to do. So that was a great line and made you continue to doubt whether Dukat was sincere or not, right?
Yeah, and it was cool because, I mean, there's always that extra depth that we expect from Star Trek, and the writing is always great. And this is one of the reasons is because we already suspect Dukat. Right? We already think his motives are not sincere. However, there's always that possibility. Like, for example, maybe, I mean, this was, 30 years in the past, maybe Dukat was sincere back then, and then something happened that changed him, or over time, we don't necessarily know, but we assume that all the worst things about Dukat, and the writers want to say, basically, for those of you that haven't caught on yet, yes, Dukat is still only having the worst of intentions, because some people might be like, oh, maybe, they want to make it clear in a very subtle and interesting way that Dukat is still a liar. He is still a manipulator. And Dukat, which is strange in this case, he's not in it for the sex. He's not in it for the comfort. He's in it for his ego. Like, he wants everybody to think that he is just this magnanimous hero. Like, for him, that's the game. The game is to have people love him. The game is to have his ego stroke. The game is to have mind power. He wants the mind fuck, And it's really interesting that's because he could just hump all those women there, right? He's this monster that can do whatever he wants. But that's not what he wants. He wants to get in their heads. It's really, really interesting.
Yeah, but even in the course of doing that, he does do quote unquote good things.
Mm.
So I know it's hard, we look at the people's intentions too, but when somebody is doing good, even if they have bad intentions, you still have to give credit for the good, regardless of the fact that they have bad intentions. Um, I mean, he fixing her scar, I thought was a poignant moment, because that could have been an easy way for him to just discard her, or say, or be angry with somebody and say, "How dare you let this person who doesn't meet my qualifications, or who's defected, quote unquote, how dare you let them make the cut?" But instead, I thought he did show a little bit of a moment of a moment of compassion there. Now, regardless of what the reason was, that scar was something that bothered her,
Yeah.
and it bothered her. It bothered her to the point where she covered it up because she felt uncomfortable for people to see it. So, um, relieving her of that anxiety is something that actually has value and should kind of be acknowledged. Now, are you doing it so you can later on do this and that? Well, yeah, but
Well, yeah,
um,
and I submit that
yeah,
there wasn't 1 ounce of compassion from him when he did that. I believe that that's all part of the manipulation. That's all part of the game. That's all him trying to convince her. What? Ah, I am such a compassionate man. Don't, never mind what you've heard. Look at me. I'm such a savior. I fixed your scar for you. I mean, it's this free thing. This thing, and she, and he's doing it to make her think, wow, he's not so bad. And clearly it worked, which is really, like taking this episode in a direction that I normally would have not expected. This is a much, much grayer episode. You would assume that the way this episode was going was that Kira would convince her mother that he's a monster, and her mother would stand up for herself, and good would prevail. But instead, it was Kira saying, she's basically dead to me. She's lost. She's been manipulated by him, and there's nothing I can do about it. And she was willing to kill her mother for it. Like, she was like, I would
yeah,
rather kill my mom than knowing that she lived out her days like this kind of life and desecrated my family and my father. And I mean, that there's a lot of gray in a lot of that. But I guess that's the whole tragedy of it all, is that when you have people beaten to submission so hard and so deeply that they're so desperate, they're hungry, they're sad, they have zero self-worth, they're broken, they're almost willing to believe anything. And anybody with this upper hand and with this control can have them do and say and think and believe things that they normally wouldn't. And that's what's so unfair about this, is the mind control. Because in Ducat's mind, he could say, oh, well, I didn't make her do anything that she didn't want to do. But we all know she wasn't in the position to make these kinds of rational decisions. She's a slave. She's beaten into submission. She's not in a position to make these decisions. And someone like him, what he's doing, he's a predator, and he's taking advantage of that vulnerability and of knowing that he can do pretty much anything to these people, because they've their entire lives have been beaten into submission. It's a really god awful thing, but so beautifully portrayed by the writers and by the actors here.
yeah, and I think what it does, it brings up an interesting, kind of um, topic in which we discuss the element of survival.
Yeah.
And in Kira's mom's case, she is doing what she believes and what is for the benefit of her family's survival.
Right.
She could resist. They could all resist, and then they could all end up dead. And there goes their whole existence. That whole family tree could
Including
get wiped
Kira.
out.
Yeah.
Including Kira.
Kira
They could all be wiped out. But if you look at it in the linear sense, because of what Kira's mom did, and even though there were 7 years of oppression for the Bajoran people, that she said she lived comfortably for 7 years while the Bajoran people were oppressed, right? And she felt a disdain for her mother for living that kind of lifestyle while her people were going through that. However, it is because Kira lived that the resistance ended up having the people that it needed to then overthrow and fight the exact occupation that she's upset about. So the survival of the people ensures the survival of the fight or the resistance.
Right.
And so you need that. Right.
Right. And that's why Kira's mom is doing what she's doing in her mind. And rightly so, she's doing something for the greater good. Now she's losing a piece of herself. She's losing all of her dignity. She's losing all of her, honor. She's losing, everything, basically, who she is as a person. But the big picture is, and people have done this since the beginning of time, where they say, they sacrifice whatever it is for what they believe to be the bigger picture. And she's saying, if I basically convince myself that this guy's good and do whatever is whatever, then my family is living comfortably. And that's why they added that scene where her husband's calling in. And that was a little hard to swallow too, as the husband calling in and be like, oh, life is so great. And this, I think a husband would probably be a little bit more like, doesn't matter what these guys do or help us with, we want you back. This is horrible. We would rather live the rest of our lives in caves than to not have you in our lives. But, again, it just goes to show when you've got people beaten into submission, they're willing to believe almost anything for, like what you're saying, survival.
Yeah, but I thought that was an interesting scene too, because it actually showed that Dukat kept his word.
True.
Because, he could have easily just sent the family off into a camp and said, banish them or they died too.
Right. And then just telling her, oh, they're doing just fine. Believe me.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, once again, there are redemptive qualities to Dukat. I know that, all of the things that you laid out very eloquently about being in a position in which you don't have any options or choices or any real true choices or options. It's, between the lesser of two evils in those kinds of scenarios. However, because things are complicated, because Dukat is not he still has to answer to people. He has to answer to his race of his Cardassian upbringing.
Typical middle management. He's got middle management energy.
Well, yeah, he does. And so things are complicated. It's not just a black and white issue. It's not like Dukat just puts his thumb up or thumb down and the war is over and everything goes back to normal. It doesn't all rest in just one person's hand like that. And so I do believe that. So when you're faced with that, then you have issues in which, are you going to be ruthless about carrying out your orders and carrying out whatever agendas in front of you? Or are you going to be compassionate about carrying out your deadly orders or ruthless orders? So there's the approach there, and there is discretion in those kinds of moments. And I think we see that regardless of whether you like the position of hierarchy that he's in, he still, one, keeps his word. Like he said, I'm going to take care of your family. They won't have to worry and struggle, which is evident by Kira's, upbringing. She's alive and she's well. We know that things worked out for her. So he kept his word on that. He also,
Wait, hang on. Before you hit the other point on that, let's take our quick break. But I know there's another half to that. Super quick break. We'll be right back on this meaty, juicy episode of The Seventh Rule. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello.
Let's just dive right back into it. We've got some trivioids. Here they come. Fast and furious. Dax wants another party. Worf does not. Quark delivers Kira Bajoran lilacs. Kira believes her mother died in the Singha Refugee Center. Dukat calls lilacs lilacs. Bashir can't understand why anyone would want to do a holosuite program in which they lose, like the Battle of the Alamo. Kira snaps at Chief O'Brien and Dr. Bashir for talking about the Battle of the Alamo. Kira wants to go to the Temple of Ipanu and visit the Orb of Time. Who doesn't? Maru, Aunt Baru, loves fresh boba. Is that what it was? Boba? Like tea? If Cardassians value cleanliness so much, they shouldn't run around in those tight leather clothes that don't breathe. That was just my own addition, I guess. Because when they said, like, you know, they're like, oh, they value cleanliness. I'm like, dude, you can't tell me when you take off your full-on leather suit, you need to hit that sonic shower yourself. I only assume you won't condemn us all, or I can only hope you won't condemn us all for the boorish behavior of one man. That quote. And Kira's going to have to shower for a week to get the smell of the leg off of her. Anyway, back to what you were saying. There was a second half to what you were saying.
Yes, the second half were subtleties, like the flowers that Dukat got for her, which kind of proved his opening statement about knowing which kind of flowers that her mother liked. And for all intents and purposes, Dukat is being truthful in this episode.
That we know of. Now, and also remember, it's entirely possible that maybe he was a different person 30 years ago. He wasn't quite as bad. But the way I'm seeing it, and we don't see, you're right, we don't see the end of this. We don't see how he really treats her. We don't see, maybe they did live happily ever after for 7 years. Maybe they were fully in love forever for the 7 years until she died. We don't know for sure. He could have just been manipulating her for 7 years, or maybe she eventually, being the smart woman that she is, saw through all of it and really cared about him. There was one line that kind of led us into that direction, which was when Kira told Maru, by the way, Maru called herself Mayru. Always drives me nuts when people pronounce names differently. Everybody called her Kira Maru, and she's like, I'm Mayru. I'm like, which one is it? We gotta know. When Kira tells Maru, she says, you know, that line that he said, that other legate told me he was going to say that. He does that with everybody. You know, it's all planned out. And Maru says, yes, I know, he told me. Now, of course, that could be, holy shit, they actually share something. He's actually being honest with her and cutting the crap and cutting the facade, and they're just being real with each other. Or it could just be a long con. It could just be that's also what he says, you know, like when he does that and he brings them back and then he says to all the women, you know, that line, I feel awful, but I use that line with all the women and I feel terrible about it, but you're the first person that I don't want to use lines with ever again. And if that means that you must banish me from your life or whatever, you know, he might, because he loves that game of getting them. He doesn't just want to be their dictator. He wants them to revere him. He wants them to think he's just this hero. So I don't know. And they never give us that answer.
But I'm going to have to rebut that. And my rebuttal is, if that is the case, then why would he be with her for 7 years after the moment when Kira leaves? He would have gotten what he wanted from her and then moved on to running that same line on the next Bajoran girl that he likes. Mm-hmm. So the fact that he stayed committed in a relationship with her for that 7 years shows me that he does. There's something, albeit sick and twisted. There's some genuine feelings he has for her. That's what I'm trying to say. And
right, which is why Kira was probably willing to kill her mom. Was she was like, oh shit, my mom is right now not being held against her will. My mom has made her decision.
Yes.
My mom has made this decision to love this guy for the betterment of her own family, but she's also convinced herself that it's palatable.
Yes. And I think there was a very good line where Sisko said it's not your decision to make, or something to that
right. Yes.
effect. So I thought it's a very complicated relationship. It's very complicated, but I did find, at least from the appearance, that Ducat is telling the truth. He starts off by telling the truth. Your mother and I, Kira, were together. So that's the truth. And as she uncovered for herself, because she went back in time and tried to see, is this true or not? She found out it is true. So he was telling the truth in the beginning.
So let me ask you, do you think that, this being said, that means that it's basically one of two things? That means that 30 years ago, Ducat, or 25 years ago, whatever it is, he was just a different person that just wasn't as bad. He was just a guy caught up in a bad situation, just trying to be as good as he could. And he actually believed the things that he was doing, and he only progressively got worse into the person that we know? Or do you think that Kira Maru was just the one soft spot in a bad person's life that made him just say, okay, I'll make an exception for this person because I truly love her?
I think that's complicated because, one, this is now the second example of him having a serious feelings towards a Bajoran woman, because Zial's mother,
and Zial
and Zial are, examples of whatever emotional feelings, sexual chemistry, whatever you want to call it, that he has with Bajoran women.
And just to take it a step further, how creepy and gross it is that he's constantly making passes at Kira. Now that we realize that he had 7 years with his mom, and he's like, oh boy, it's like that Neil Diamond song, "Girl, you'll be a woman soon." What's the other one? That he's like, look at what you've done. Now you become a grown-up girl. I always thought that was the creepiest song. But that's what he's singing to Kira. He's like, my, you sure have grown up to be quite a lot like your mother.
Yes. And now, having watched this, it's very creepy that he's been hitting on Kira this whole time, because he literally, we see how old she is in this episode when this relationship starts with her mom. So,
and how old Ducat was too. That makes you think, how old is Ducat right now? That 30 years ago he was still a regular middle-aged dude.
Yeah, but 1 year is 7 years in Cardassian years. It's like the dog thing. So he's a lot younger than he looks. But yeah. Also, I love the moment where Kira checks Bashir. Like when she comes into ops and she's like, "Hey, what's going on? You guys are over here having this little Alamo conversation here. Like, Chief, did you do the thing that I asked you to do?"
Mm-hmm.
No, I feel just gonna.
That was pretty good.
Good. And then she went right into cutting him down. Yeah, I thought so. I go ahead and get that done.
And the same thing with Bashir. She says, like, and are you here for a reason, Bashir? He's like, oh, we just, and she's like, I thought so. Get that.
Yeah. And the look that they had, it was that awkward moment. She's like, and do you have any reason to be here? And he looks at her like, huh? And she looks at him like, huh? So there's no words. It's just the look like, yeah, did you not hear what I said? Do you have any reason to be here? Like, but there was no words. It was just eye contact, and I loved that little exchange between them.
You're right. I noticed that too. That, and again, I don't know if it was direction or if it was an actor's choice, but the director clearly chose to catch that reaction. I made a note of that too, because just the line was, like, are you here for a reason? And then he does his thing. But there was that exchange. He had a nonverbal reaction of like, that. And then the camera cuts back to her. Like it's like a tennis match. He hits over a look like, wait, are you calling me out? Like this was 6 years ago? And she's looking back like, yeah, I fucking am. What do you, like it was hilarious.
Yes.
But the camera caught both of them and then goes back to him. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And I love that exchange because the look she gives him is like I'm not going to repeat myself. And I know you heard what I said. So it was a perfect, it was a good moment between the two of them. I love the unspoken kind of exchange between them. The other thing I thought was good, as far as you mentioned director, and this is, our DP, Jonathan West, who was, always there for the most part, even when he's not directing. So he got courtside seats to everybody's directing. And so he has a real good feel for the touch of the characters. And I thought one of the things he did in this episode with this kind of soft lighting behind Kira's mom, when they had that scene between the two of them, and there was that light coming in through the window, and Kira goes and reaches behind her hair and reveals the scar. And I thought that moment was really well lit, and it felt intimate, and it felt like a soft moment between two people.
Talking about Jonathan West, it made me think, well, hang on a second. If Jonathan West, who was your weekly director of photography, was directing, who was the DP for this episode? And I just checked, and it was kind of his right-hand man, Chris Crosscove, who I heard, by the way, wore his pants backwards.
No, not Chris Crosscove will make it jump.
There it is. There, he's the daddy Mac. But so they're both DP. They're both credited as DP. So it's probably one of those things where Jonathan West is also kind of being DP, but he needs to be a director. And so he's got his lieutenant, Chris Crosscove, who I've met, by the way. Great dude. I'm sure you know who that is as well. But they clearly make a great team. And when I noticed the great shot that made me go, who's directing this? Who's the DP? What's going on here? It was when Kira first wakes up. It's early on in the episode when there's like a shot of the lilacs, shot of the lilacs, and then it kind of reveals over to Kira sleeping when she gets the call from Ducat. And the colors were so vibrant, it really like stood out, on Deep Space Nine. And it was just a really nice shot. And that right then was when I said, okay, who's directing this? Because clearly the person that's directing this is probably a cinematographer, because that's, he's got that DPI. So that was really, really good shot. Yeah. And they were throughout this whole episode.
Yeah. And like the one I'm talking about with the light behind her mom's hair.
Yep.
In that scene, the lighting was, really, and I was actually saying, where is this light coming from? There's a star or two bright around here. But it looked good on thing. And Chris Crossco, by the way, our first camera operator, he's always there as well. He was one of the studs on our show, 6 foot, 6'3", kind of beach boy guy.
They're both helping out on the Voyager documentary, by the way. They're both on set. That's how I met him. And they're still, it's great to see that 25 years later, they're still working hand in hand together as a tight unit.
Yeah, they've put in a lot of work together, and shout out to Chris. I haven't seen him in years. But I was watching this episode. Another thing that I want to just take real quick note of is when they did do the close up on Bajor, I saw some of the nice little buildings that they had in the background. That was my rendition of one of them. And it just reminds me Greek building almost. Style. Yeah, with the pillars and the dome.
Mm-hmm, the Michael pillars.
It reminds me of just in general how ancient these pillar structures are. Mm-hmm. Now we see them in Rome, we've seen them in Greece, We see them in ancient Egypt, and they're also in Ethiopia in a city called Lalibela. So you see them everywhere. And just as an architectural style, you wonder who is the first person to build one of these pillar buildings and where, because that's something that architecturally has kind of maintained true throughout time. And even 400, 500 years into the future in Bejor, they still got that same kind of thing going on. So I thought that was interesting too.
What was that place? Lalibela in Ethiopia?
Lalibela. Yeah, Lalibela. Yeah. Lalibela.
Presumably on the Nile.
There's these places with these rock-hewn churches, so they're all carved out of single stones of rock.
Oh, I think I've heard of that, where they just cut the church. They kind of carve a church out of a rock, right?
Yeah,
oh,
including the inside. So they'll hollow it out. The pillars, everything is literally one piece of rock that was just chiseled away into a church. So yeah, that's in Lalibela. It's one of the wonders of the world, I think. And it's definitely like a UNESCO heritage site. It's beautiful stuff.
So let's also.
But I just wanted to make note of that.
Yeah, that's really cool. Let's also spend a second on Kira, because this is a very gray episode to me. There's no clear, like, the good guys won kind of moment. There's no clear, like, you did the right thing kind of moment. It seems like everybody kind of did something gray. Nobody did something right. Nobody did. Even Kira is probably questioning whether she should have killed her mom or not. I mean, she wanted to. And so I wonder when
I can't do that. The whole killer mom thing. I was like, come on, that was too harsh for me.
That was I even wrote down,
wow, kill your mom.
I know.
Blooded.
I was surprised by it too. I was like, wow, that was a quick turn. But she's very clear in her convictions. Like, she hates Cardassian. She hates collaborators. She hates that her mom basically, desecrated their family in a way, But what I was thinking is, I wonder what, and I hope we could ask her sometime, I wonder what Nana's feeling was when she read this script. If she was like, wow, this is really interesting, I can't wait to shoot it. Or if she was just like, ooh, this can be a tough one to get through, because it's really rides that line of good and bad in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think that, Nana, like other women who understand, these kinds of situations, know about the abuse of power that, that men have inflicted on women throughout the ages. It still exists today. We know about the casting couches and the whole Harvey Weinsteins of the world. So kind of leveraging power to get things out of women is not a new concept. And so I'm sure that Nana was interested in kind of telling that kind of a story, because it's something that women have to deal with on a regular basis. So I think that would be the main thing she would say. But I do think that kind of, killing your mom is way crossing the line.
Yep.
She's not, I think it's, she slept with a bad guy. Like give her a pass, bro. It's like, seriously, she didn't.
She's your mom.
Exactly. She's your mom. Like, okay, she made poor choices with her, with her body, but
and she barely even had the choice.
Well, yeah, she didn't even have the choice, and she was doing it for you. So, like, I don't want to hear that. That's not a good enough reason for me. And the other thing I'm a little bit upset about too is, Sisko, did he not explicitly say, do not alter the past, do not alter the timeline, do not, Starfleet has really strict protocol when it comes to the timeline.
Kira's not very like, Kira does it anyway. We've seen her do it anyway so many times.
And Kira's like, I'm going to kill everybody. I'm going to blow the whole thing up. I'm going to, what future would she have gotten back to if she was successful? If she did kill her mom,
she'd be dead.
Caught. Like, maybe she'd be dead, but like, what would be the ultimate like maybe more Bajorans would have died because of that. Maybe they would have said, okay, let's round up all the Bajorans and let's exterminate them, and we won't even keep them in labor camps. We'll just kill them all because we can't trust them. And look at this, they killed the prefect. It could have had negative consequences too, right? It doesn't mean that this whole thing goes away. Okay, she killed Ducat, she killed her mom, and now everybody gets released and free, and the whole, like, it could have had negative consequences. I didn't think that was
certainly
really,
would have, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that was a smart kind of way to think out things in that moment. Maybe kidnapping her mom or something else. Maybe it would have a less of thing, but you're going to kill the prefect. You're going to kill the Cardassian leader. I mean, something's going to happen to the Bajoran people because of that. There's going to be consequences for that.
And I think a lot of that, and I totally agree, but I think a lot of that is doing that they have the confines of a 43-minute episode. I feel like they would have wanted the chance to show that change in Major Kira for a longer amount of time. Like, bad thing happens and more bad things and more bad things till she finally snaps. But in 43 minutes, you kind of just got to go on the ride with her. But yeah, I agree that like so many times, Cardassians have said, you killed one of our people, so we will kill 50 of yours. So I think that if Kira had killed Ducat and Maru, they would have said, oh, okay, Kira, so you are dead, or whatever her name was, Nalo or whatever. And we know that you befriended this family. We're going to kill all of them. We're going to make you watch us kill them and 50 other Bajoran families, and then we're going to kill you, or something like that. So that's why you're right. I think Kira would have ceased to exist. She would have been done.
She would have been done, and it would have been, it would have had negative, lasting consequences that would not have reversed the outcome for the Bajoran people and liberated them any sooner. Really quickly, I did want to say that watching Ducat actually reminds me of Vladimir Putin.
Wow. I could see
you go
it,
back, go back and watch some of these scenes in this episode, there are some Putin, like he looks like Putin with just, with all this makeup on. But
if he were a pasta, he'd be Putanesque, right? Because he's Putinesque. That's a real pasta. It's a real thing. It's delicious.
Yes. And the other thing I want to talk about is this Bajoran dude that was like the pimp of the girls. What a sellout! Man. I couldn't stand that guy either. He was worse than the Cardassians to me. I was like, dude, stop doing their bidding for them that hard. He was like, the guards, come over here, and he was worse than the Cardassians to some extent.
Glad you brought that up. That guy shows a long line of collaborators historically, where the people, the oppressed tend to hate the collaborators as much or more because they're like betraying their people, and they have to one up the bad guys so that the bad guys are like, well, he's one of the good ones, basically. You know what I mean? Like, you're right. Like, he has to be the worst Cardassian of the bunch as a Bajoran in order to convince them that he's one of them, right? Now, my favorite part with him that I watched 5 times was when Ducat grabs Maru's hair and he's like, what is this? And Basso pops in, he's like, whoom. Oh, so like he just had this totally comedic pop in. There's Ducat, there's Maru, and then right over his shoulder, he just like pops in like, here I am. You called, boss? Here I am. Like, it was the funniest damn thing. But that guy is target number 1 for all the Bajorans. They're like, this guy dies first.
He dies first. I wrote down in my notes, Bajoran creepy pimp ass kisser. That's what I was like, I hate that.
That's almost an acronym for his name, Basso, Bajoran ass.
Yeah, he was just like, he was so creepy to me, and I was like, what a sellout, man. You're over here selling out your people, and you're kissing ass just to gain their favor. The other thing I thought of was the movie Braveheart. I don't know about you,
Yep.
but in that movie, I think Mel Gibson, and there was an edict that came from the king that the king could sleep with anybody's wife that he wanted to. Wasn't that in the movie? And at
I
some
don't
point,
remember that. That just reminds me of History of the World Part 1, where he said, it's good to be the king.
yeah, I think it was in Braveheart. It may have been another Mel Gibson movie, and I'll be forgiven. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but there was an edict that came from the king, said that the king had the right to sleep with anybody's wife if he wanted to, and eventually it came to Mel Gibson's woman that he was in love with, and that began the whole kind of movie. That was the impetus for him to have that kind of killer spirit and go against the government. But essentially, it was about the fact that this edict had come down where the king gets to pick whoever he wants for his woman. And I thought of that too, watching this. Like, oh, so it's like, here, let's get the concubines together. The kings and the rulers get to pick who they want. And that's a kind of another kind of ancient idea when you think about conquering and these different wars that have happened in migrations of people. Genghis Khan, for example, comes to mind. But when these conquering of nations, that also comes with this same kind of intermingling or taking of people's women or property and all of this kind of usurping and taking of stuff. So very realistic to me to have this kind of concept in this episode in the future.
Yeah, no, you're right. We got to run in just a second here. I just realized that my nitpick was the thing with the Cardassians wearing too many rubber clothes and complaining that other people should worry about cleanliness. So just pretend I did that. And now Jake Sisko guesses the IMDb score.
I like the casting as the mom. I wanted to say that really quickly. The mom that was casting as I thought matched Kira and the kid. And the kid thought they matched body type and just height wise and all things. But really good episode. I didn't think it was going to be that good when it started out, but as it went on, I really liked it. I'm going to say 7.9.
Wowie. All right. So everybody at home, stick around for the free-for-all, and you're going to find out what it was. We want to give a very special thanks to Carmen, a.k.a. Skillet. Y'all know that.
Skillet.
TJ Jackson-Bey out in Missouri. Bill Victor Arucan.
Arucan.
Yvette Blackmon, Tom. Yvette's like, why you always got to put me after the Arucan? You can barely hear my name being said.
We love Yvette.
We sure do. Yvette Blackmon, that is. Homer Freezy out somewhere in New Yeezy. Eve England out in Wales. Dr. Anne-Marie Segal. Titus Mohler. Tim Baum, a.k.a. Grandpa One. Darlena Marie. John Mann. Rex A. Wood. Dr. Mohamed Noor. Joe Balsarati. Tierney C. Dieckmann. We've also got Michelle Melendez. Marcia Classic Schreier. Anna Post. Jenna Appleton, and Fred Sobozhensky. I'll bet I'm saying that right, but we'll see.
Perfect.
And especially Dr. Susan V. Gruner. Thank you all very much. Stick around for the free-for-all right now. And until then, always remember the seventh rule.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the free-for-all section of the seventh rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello, hello.
Hello. Tonight we have Malissa Longo with us, and I believe Mochi's off camera somewhere.
Yeah, she's very, very playful right now.
So she should be making plenty of guest appearances tonight. And we have Eve England out in Wales.
Hi.
We have Tierney C. Dieckmann in Virginia Beach. Was that it?
That is it.
I remembered, see? And we've got my neighbor, Dr. Mohamed Noor.
Hey.
Actually, I think I'm closer to Tierney.
Sure, my distant neighbor, Homer, way up there in New York. Way up there. And then Grandpa One is surfing the seven seas. Mr. Timothy Baum. How you doing, Tim? And of course, we have Mr. Ryan T. Husk, the reason we're all
Of
here.
course.
The Incredible.
Real quick, you guys, I forgot to mention in our recording, catterpod beans. Did you guys catch them when Kira, Nerys, and Maru were both eating catterpod beans? Or at least they mentioned it. And this is at least the third time we've heard catterpod beans. The first time was when Jake Sisko said something about catterpod beans in like the third season. He was like, catterpod. I don't remember what it was. But then we heard it again in the fifth season. And Cirroc gave me the same look he's giving me right now when I was like, don't you remember? You mentioned catterpod beans before. He's like, I don't remember that. Now it happened a third time and nobody remembers catterpod beans. I swear this is the third time they've mentioned those. Okay. So
oh my gosh.
Jake Sisko guessed the IMDb score. He said 7.9. Any of you guys have any guesses that don't already know?
I already know.
We forgot.
7.7. I'll go a little bit lower.
Yeah, I'd say 7.6 is probably.
Yeah, that was kind of my guess too.
That sounds about.
Okay, the answer is 6.9.
Whoa.
Way
Yeah,
too
That's
low in
lower
my
than it should
opinion.
be. Yeah,
Whoa.
it's lower than it
That's
should
the
Yeah.
one, the lower one.
be. Mm-mm.
Where are Anne-Marie and Sue right now to say it should be 10?
Yelling 10. It's a 10.
See if
Go
I can bring
10
it
it.
up right now. Yeah.
6.9. Boy. that's
Treat it
awesome.
like
Yeah.
Dave and 10 it. Thank you.
Maybe it was less about the
Boy.
episode and more discomfort for
Yeah,
what was happening
that-
to those women or something like
Yeah.
that. I mean, it was fair then. It's like, we could see that being just bothering people.
And thank you, Eve,
But-
for catching that one a little later. I was looking right. I was like, you know this one, Eve.
My
What were you
brain's
saying,
a bit
Melissa?
slow this time.
Melissa?
Does anybody oh, sorry.
What?
I thought you were
What?
saying something. Maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, I forgot. Go ahead. It's very active right
All right. Well, what were you saying,
in my
Cirroc?
house right now.
He's going to be like, I forgot. Fuck you.
No, I was trying to find more information about the title,
Yeah.
Wrongs Darker Than Death or Night. And I felt like it's a poem or it comes from somewhere.
It does.
And I was hoping that maybe somebody can enlighten me.
I know where to find it to enlighten you. I can find it real quick.
Google.
Well,
I
it's
saw it was
in
Shelley.
the IMDb trivia. And it was taken from Prometheus Unbound,
Mhm.
a
It's-
quote in there.
What's that? Is that a poem or a book?
It's like
It's a lyrical
lyrical
drama.
drama.
Play?
Somewhere between.
Yeah, it's kind of like a play, but it was never intended to be performed like a play, so it's kind of just used as a style of writing for dramatic effect, I think. Yeah.
Like slam poetry.
Because I think it's quite interesting. So I'm not really familiar with the poem, but I think it's all about reconciliation or not as well, which I suspect is why they would have chosen it, because it's all about Kira trying to reconcile her views of her mother, etc. So I don't know. I think I might look that up because that would be interesting to find out if what the parallels are to the poem.
Mm-hmm. Well, Eve, do you have any thoughts on this episode or any fun bits of trivia from the companion? The DS9 companion, not Maru's companion.
Yeah, I mean, there was quite a lot of stuff in the companion about Nanar's sort of issues with where this was in the relationship with Ducat generally. But in terms of what I really liked about this episode was it was really interesting to go back in time and see Ducat at that time, having seen his fall in the earlier Waltz episode. And what really struck me on this rewatch was when you watch Ducat in this episode, he isn't portrayed as a monster in terms of what you see on screen. And it really does show how deluded he really was, and explains a lot of the journey that he had in waltz, from getting over that. Well, he'd obviously convinced himself at that time quite comprehensively that he was actually a good guy and was doing this to protect these women, as a ruse for all of the horrendous things he was doing outside of what we saw on screen. And I thought it was a really good way of showing it, so that we actually that was much more powerful to me, his persona in this, by reference to what we know in waltz, and actually the fact that this even came up because he's just being really spiteful to Kira. So I think it was a really good positioning of this episode after he'd already had that sort of transition from really understanding and admitting to himself that, all of that way that he was and how he perceived himself was just a complete lie. So I thought that was really interesting.
Cirroc was mentioning that we didn't see a difference in Ducat in present time like we may have expected after waltz. And it sounded like that's kind of where you kind of hinted at that.
Yeah, I think because that's all we've had so far is Ducat's own, rantings about, I was a good guy, I was doing it to help them. But actually it looks like when he was on a one-to-one personable level, he wasn't this monster that, Kira probably had images of him being, from remembering what he was doing as part of the occupation, because she didn't see him on that level. So I think it's interesting that we see it from, a neutral perspective, that you can see why he may have been in that position, that he convinced himself that he was this good guy in certain parameters and certain environments that he was in. I think that was the thing that really hit home to me is that aspect of his personality. And it was just really interesting to see it rather than just from him or from Kira, where you have that polarized view of what Ducat was really like. So it's quite interesting from a psychological perspective.
Well, why don't we ask the person himself, Goldu Scott?
Whoa!
What were you thinking?
It did catch me when he first sends in the message, and I had to think back, because I was like, I feel like the last time I saw him, he was jumping on the back of a shuttlecraft screaming about genocide, and then he pops up and he's like, "Hey, I had this epiphany. your captain kicked my ass in a cave, and then I'm cool now. I banged your mom. Peace." And he's just out. And, she had to go, and then it was like immediately she had to go figure this out for herself, because obviously this guy is so back and forth and left and right. The big question I had in this whole thing, which I'm surprised that 20 whatever years later, has Kira ever mentioned having two brothers before?
Maybe
when she sees herself as the baby, they're two younger brothers, and I don't remember ever seeing that, and that hit me pretty hard. But yeah, that one right there, and I love this. Is one of my favorite Kira episodes, because it is such a character, another microscope over her as a character, and
it does make you wonder. It does make you wonder, Scott, if she's never mentioned her younger brothers before. Maybe that means they were killed.
Probably so. I mean, if she was old enough, if she held a rifle when she was old enough to hold it, who knows what could have happened to them.
Well, and especially when she tells Maru, don't count on it, that they're going to take care of your family. So that could be hinting at they didn't make it either. Yeah.
But like I was, the microscope over Kira is always welcome to me. But if we'd have seen this episode and this situation 3 years ago, I don't know if she would have been able to handle the whole forgiving of her mother after seeing that kind of thing. I think she's definitely gotten to the point now where she's evolved that much as a person that she can actually, I don't know, she would have just blew the whole room up and just walked away, maybe even a year ago. Now she goes through this whole self-analyzation and comes out of it even better of a person too. So
it's a good point.
Somehow even better.
Tierney, your thoughts?
Oh, I have lots of thoughts, and I did actually find the quote from Prometheus Unbound, which is a lyrical drama concerning the torments of the Greek mythological figure Prometheus, who defies the gods and gives fire to humanity. And
Nice.
It is quite a long quote. I won't read the whole thing, but it is within Memory Alpha if anybody wants to go and find it or just read Prometheus Unbound. It is really beautiful. But this is a hell of an episode. It elicits a lot of strong emotions for me in particular, and it's a damn good Kira episode too. And I wasn't here for change of heart, but like that for Worf, where we need episodes like that for some of the, I mean, what I love with DS9 particularly is character growth. And like with Worf there, and we see him fail in his duty, and roundabout that is, it kind of becomes one of his greatest successes. This, with Kira, we see her gray areas and her growth as a character, and her struggles and hardships and Maru's as well. And not every person is black and white, and we really see that with the characters through DS9. And looking beyond the discoverable facts of the story, as the audience, it's good to have these episodes of past gravity. Because remember, we as the audience didn't witness the Cardassian occupation. Emissary and DS9 itself is the cleanup operation. We get to see glimpses of it in episodes that revisit the past, and but getting to see the fictional Cardassian occupation and its brutalities beyond the gunfire. These episodes are the reminder of real life in parallel, and now especially they are beyond required, these reminders. I mean, 20 years ago they were, but now even more so, looking back on it and seeing, I mean, this is a reminder of real comfort women. I mean, this isn't some arbitrary term. And real comfort women, and brutal sexual slavery of hundreds of thousands of women. And I implore anyone watching in the live chat, anything, if you don't know what a comfort woman is, look it up. If you do know, look it up, familiarize yourself, and apply it to this episode, to life, to your own current views of the changing world, what everything is now. Because whether it's a result of genocide, wartime, Holocaust, because that's how it's been justified in this and in reality, that it's to protect women during wartime. Yeah. This is still occurring today, now, in many, many forms. And it isn't just women. And many of them, they're definitely not adults either. And with this episode, maybe it's a sign of the times back then, that they could use comfort women as a plot point, as a plot device to make this idea happen, and it'd be okay to use. Because if you tried that now, especially on regular television networks, I don't know how well that would fly, to just have it, this easily laid out in front of you with the words and all, not even sidestepping around the phrases that are used. But, it depends on how you take it. It could have been done bravely and poignantly, or it could even be seen as a little bit deaf and, tasteless. But I don't see it like that.
Tierney, you think that today's society is less open to hearing about that stuff than 25 years ago? Is that what you're saying?
Not so much less open to it, but maybe more easily offended by it in some ways. It's hard to put it into words, where you can watch shows from 80s, 90s that touch on these issues, and it's the same issues that we're touching on now that we can maybe talk about a little bit more easily. But it still seems like nothing is being done, that the awareness still needs to happen. But more and more, you push that awareness, and people are, they're far more offended because they think they're supposed to be. Whereas we could do this then. Ira and Michael Piller and all of them, they can take this idea for an episode and put it into an episode of Star Trek, of horrible things and atrocities, and just put it into writing and put it out there. And if you tried this now, you'd have Twitter up in arms. They'd be losing their mind. We'd have some sort of look at this BS that broke the internet, as opposed to look at this, look what we did. And this needs to be seen and heard, and even just building on the characters themselves, of her struggles with her mother and what she had to do, what she thought she had to do for her family, even if it wasn't right. She lived a horrendous life and wanted to escape Meru. And yes, it was awful, psychologically horrendous, but who's to say some of us wouldn't do exactly the same thing in that position, starving and just,
right.
I mean, so yeah, this episode has so much more, and it deserves to make the rounds again and again and again for just awareness.
Well, Ira never shied away from hot button issues, which is so great. I mean, even 24 years ago, even if he were doing it today, I bet you they'd be like, that's going to make people feel uncomfortable. And he'd say, good, I want them to feel uncomfortable.
Feel uncomfortable. That's how things get done. Yeah.
Melissa Longo and Kat Mochi, do you have any thoughts on this?
A lot of thoughts, and I agree that it's good that they shine a light on these kind of things, because if we turn a blind eye to all of the atrocities that have happened in the past, we're just going to repeat those same atrocities in the future. That's how history repeats itself constantly. So if we don't see these things and see the brutality of them, how are we supposed to learn from them? And I think that Meru, and I get it, Kira was a little hard on her because the stakes for her were really hard, really high. I mean, if she had refused Dukat, what did that mean for her family? He would have wiped them all out. And what makes Dukat so dangerous is because he is such a smooth talker, such a charmer, such a snake in the grass, easily lull you into a sense of security. That's what makes him the most dangerous. So it's a great episode, and I like seeing Kira struggle with this, because she's seeing her hero fall from her pedestal. This idea of what she had of her mother in her head has been wiped out, and she's got to reassess that. And of course, that's not going to happen overnight. It's not realistic to say, oh, well, she did this because of us. But, I'm glad that they didn't make Kira the lover of Dukat, because that would just be really weird. And
thumbs down from Mohamed.
Yeah. And I agree with Nana on that front, and I agree with the kind of ambiguous ending as well, because she would still have feelings of struggle inside of her to deal with her view of her mother now.
It did have a very ambiguous. And did any of you guys think that it kind of, when the first time you saw it, did you ever think like, oh, that's it, it's over? Like I'd already seen this episode, and it hit me where I was like, oh, that's it. Like what's going to happen?
Yeah. No, it was surprising, and it wasn't that feel good ending. Like, oh, now she forgives her mom and everything's a-okay. It left you grappling with that same feeling of, where do I go from here? What do I do with this feeling?
And the companion actually says that they did that deliberately, that they didn't want to add any judgment either way, because I think they were trying to make that point. We all have views of what collaborators are and who they are. And as they're talking about in the episode itself, it isn't black and white. And as you just said, Melissa, you can't just judge Marie just because the optics look horrendously bad. But, and that's why it was really powerful when she had that scene with the video con with her husband. And that's where it really came out that then there was two sides. She wasn't just being entirely selfish about having this perceived amazing life. And I think that's what they're trying to do, is showing, that history is complex. And although you have, black and white aspects, there's all that grey in between for, who's to blame. And we always want to blame someone, but actually it's far more complex than that. You just have to understand that it is complex, which is why we get ourselves into these situations all the time, because it's not, if it was absolutely clear one way or the other, a lot of things probably would never have happened.
Right. And it's easy for us to pass judgment on somebody with whom we haven't walked in their shoes, or in whose shoes we haven't walked. Thanks, Mohamed. But that's the whole thing, right? Like, it's easy for us to say, I can't believe you did that, but we're not starving and oppressed for our entire lives. What do you think, Mohamed?
Yeah, actually, both Melissa and Eve, and some extent Tierney earlier, hit one of my two questions. So the first one was, what does Kira think should have happened? Like, what does she think Marie was supposed to have done? Like, just tried to slit Gul Dukat's throat in his sleep? And it's like, well, then probably the response from the Cardassians would have been to destroy the entire city that all her family was from. Like, is that better? I'm not. It was less clear to me. Like, why is that a better option? Which, I mean, I get that's part of the whole plot. Like, it's not so clear. But I didn't even really understand the other perspective there, because to some extent, Marie is suffering in a big way. I mean, she's living with this tremendous guilt, which I know that's not the same as actually starving to death and things like that. But yeah, I couldn't really understand what it was Kira thought Marie should have done exactly, aside from just fighting a pointless battle. But
yeah, for sure. What was the other question?
Yeah, the other question is, Gul Dukat has had more than ample opportunity to bring this up before.
Yeah, he has.
What was his motivation for not bringing? I mean, I can't imagine he didn't think of it until now.
Well, he's been holding it back all this time.
But I think now that he has more of a grudge against Kira than he did before, after Waltz. Because I was thinking that too. And going forward, he is more fixated on her now than he was before. And how else, when better to drop a bombshell on somebody that you've now focused your intent dislike for, than to drop it on your mother's birthday, your beloved mother's birthday.
So essentially he was holding it to use as a future bomb. Because I'm just imagining like for example, in the long walk when they first met his daughter, like I can't imagine, by the way, I knew your mom. Like that didn't come up.
Well, it's like what Cirroc was saying earlier, which is after after Waltz, we're expecting that change in Dukat. So maybe part of that change is that he's contemplative. Maybe he's looking back at his life. Maybe all of these things are resurfacing.
Yeah. Well, part of I was probably trying to understand what his motivation was for not bringing it up earlier, less so than why he did bring it up now.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Well, Tim Baum out in Fiji. Your thoughts?
As a storyline, I really enjoyed it. As an episode, I sometimes tire of the time travel episodes. It's and aside from that, I thought it was a very good controversial issue they brought up that needed to be brought up. But at the same time, it's like I get a little tired of some of these time travels. So, but I did really first couple times I ever watched, I really enjoyed this episode. But let's move on. So,
okay.
And I agree with Mohamed is that, why wasn't this ever brought up before?
Tim, I was going to ask you then, what is your favorite of the time travel episodes besides Trials and Tribulations?
I enjoyed the mini one with where Chief O'Brien kept going 15 minutes into the future or 5 hours into the future.
And he actually just straight up killed O'Brien? Just brought in another one?
Same O'Brien, just different timeline.
No. I mean, I enjoyed the Bell Riots one, but I don't know. Sometimes they get a little old. It's almost like a gimmick. But overall, I did enjoy it. But I can understand why it had a low rating because it really had nothing to do with the current storyline that's going on. This was just kind of like an aside.
What about yesterday's Enterprise or Cause and Effect from Next Generation?
I did not like either one of those.
Wow. I thought I was going to stump you, but you are a man of integrity here.
No, the one I did enjoy was the original series. The original series. One,
forever.
The one was Terry Garr was in it, where they went back to NASA. Back in the 70s.
I forgot it was called like Mission something. I can't remember the name.
Yeah,
Simon Earth? No, not Simon Earth.
Oh, Simon, maybe that
I think it's
Simon Earth.
I really enjoyed that.
There were two that were similar.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did like that one.
I had no idea. We never knew this about you, Tim.
Something new.
From now on, when there's a time travel. So did you like Trials and Tribulations then?
I thought it was a good gimmick.
There is no pleasing this man.
Wow.
Melissa's like, I'm going to jump through this screen.
Wow. That's good.
I thought the special effects were great, and some of the jokes were like, "That's a Klingon."
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about it.
It was very cleverly done. But what about Little Green Men?
Okay, that one was
amazing.
a blast. I did enjoy that one.
Got one. All right.
Yes.
Well, we finally got one. Homer Freezy out somewhere in New Yeezy. Time travel episodes, yay or nay?
I mostly like them. This one, it was way too easy. I'm going to look into the orb, and the prophets will send me so I can get there at the exact moment and see what's going on with my mom. Because Dukat said this thing, but they didn't dwell on it, and it happened really quickly, and we're into the story, so it served its purpose. I agree with a nitpick, which is I can't believe Dukat waited until the waltz and then to drop this bomb. They were in this cave before, and he sat on this prickly thing. It could have happened then, even though they were sort of getting along. You're a lot like your mother. Slide that in there. Whatever it was. Hey. And then I have to say, okay, so let's follow this episode through. So at the very end, there's this explosion. And Kira, or the character she was on Terok Noor, is still there, not there. disappears. Like, what happens? She didn't disturb the timeline, yet that person probably isn't there anymore. So I would presume she was killed in the blast, but she was up with those other folks, or maybe she tossed them forward. Maybe I have to watch it again to see it. I don't know.
Good point.
And I had something else.
It might just be that little mini timeline never happened because it was just her having a vision, like a dream. Like she's watching this thing and participating in this dream, but as soon as that dream's over, that timeline gets tossed back. Maybe.
Or maybe it was an actual Bajoran woman, another Bajoran comfort woman who got killed in the blast, and Kira was just filling her spot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then the other thing, Mohamed, you mentioned just about what he thought, or what she thought Maru should do. It's kind of like what was the Bajoran plot going to accomplish? It's the same thing. You are killing Dukat, and it's just going to be more widespread carnage, which they were going for, so that they could get out from under the oppression, regardless of how they were doing it. So I think the outcome would have been the same, just less focused.
Okay.
Good point.
Yeah. Really good.
I had forgotten the ending of this episode, and I'm glad that they didn't give it a rosy ending. So I thought that was it's not a satisfying ending, but it was an appropriate ending, and I think it was done well.
Yeah. Cirroc, did we cover everything before we hit the free for all?
I was going to just add really quickly that they could have called this one Kobayashi Maru.
Hey, zip thing.
Yeah.
Kira Yoshi.
Brian,
Kira Yoshi Maru. Yeah.
Is this a lose-lose or what?
Yeah, there's no win here. No win.
Yeah. And the other thing I thought was how soft her dad was at the end. Like,
yeah,
everything's great over here. Just keep having sex with that guy and see if you can get us some grapes.
Yeah.
Like, I just
peeled.
Yeah, it's like it was kind of weird a little bit. I don't know if I'd be the guy like that excited about it. You know, he didn't seem to say he missed her that much.
You must be doing something right.
Yeah, everything's great over here. Just keep it up. I love it. You know, it's just kind of weird a little bit to me. But I did want to say that the Dukat part. I think that Dukat was being honest and truthful in this episode, and that's what bothered Kira the most. Because it was the moment when she planted the bomb and the video plays of her dad saying that everything was okay and that they were eating well, which actually validated Dukat's promise that he was going to do that. So it was truthful. And it also proved that Dukat, in the beginning of the episode, when he says, your father told you this because that's what he wanted you to know, but it's not the truth. And the truth is actually this. And once again, he was proven to be correct in that as well. So he was being honest, whether or not you agree with the tactics and you know, the pressures of his occupancy and him using his power or whatever it is. At the end of the day, he was still truthful about, one, being with her mom, two, the lie that her dad told her about where her mom was. He was truthful about knowing about the lilacs, about the scar on her face, all of those things.
I know.
Yeah, all of those. All of those things proved himself to be truthful. So he was not lying about those things. And I believe that it was that final moment where she heard that, you know, her father saying how the kids were doing okay, that made her say, okay, well, you know, let me back out of this because there's some good coming out of this whole thing. And I don't want to destroy whatever good is coming out of this. So, yeah, that's my summation of, the other thing is, I think that the scene with the scar on the face perfectly sums up who Dukat is as a person. He is disgusted by the scar that he put on her face, or the people that he, you know, his occupant and his people. He's disgusted by it, and yet wants to remove it and erase it as if it never happened, just like he's trying to remove and erase whatever
Yep.
negative role he had in as a Cardassian in this whole thing. So I think it really sums up his role on the show. That's
I wonder real quick. I know we got to go, but real quick, when you mentioned Kira watching her dad, saying all that everything's great. I wonder if there was that moment that what changed her mind was that when he said the kids are eating, they're doing great. Kira's gained 5 pounds. I wonder if she thought, I remember that time. I remember that time when mom was gone, but suddenly I was eating well and life was good again, because she did have that moment where she stopped and thought, and I wonder if we're led to believe that she's going, that her memory of her childhood is validating what he's saying. And maybe that's what helped change it.
Right.
Anyway.
Well, yeah, that, and they're on, from the dad's perspective, I think both Kira's father and mother were doing everything they could to protect their children. So that was the point of the message, saying, don't worry about us, do what you need to do, because we got to take care of our kids. And then Maru was going to bed with Dukat because she's trying to take care of her kids, and not just her kids, but her family. And then, but I do have a nitpick before we go.
Okay, but Grandpa One still doesn't like time travel episodes, so nothing you're going to say is going to convince them.
Got to fix that.
Yeah, no, I do have a one little minor. It's a minor nitpick. Little Kira Nerys doesn't have brown eyes.
Thank you.
Good eye.
Oh,
wow.
I have tons of nitpick notes, and that is one of them.
Nana's eyes are so beautifully big and brown that was a
maybe Bajorans are like cats, where sometimes they're all born with like blue eyes or something, but then they change later. Anyway, thank you all very much. Maybe you're right.
Good save.
Thank you all very much for joining us. For Goldu Scott, for Homer Freezy out somewhere in New Yeezy, for Tierney, for Melissa, Eve England out in Wales, Grandpa One, who's like, you show me a time travel episode and I'll show you a thumbs down, period. For Mohamed Noor and Cirroc Lofton, we'll see you next time. Thank you very much for joining us. And always remember the 7th.